crazy stepmom tried to break up my wedding by claiming my fiancé was cheating on me with another girl. Well, it backfired. A week ago, I stood at the altar with Kyle, surrounded by the people who mattered most to us. The air was filled with laughter, warmth, and the kind of happiness that only comes from being with the ones you love. Everything was perfect, almost. The only stain on that beautiful day was my stepmother, Gigi, who tried to sabotage the whole thing by making up lies about Kyle. Growing up, my parents did not stay together, but they handled co-parenting well. No matter what, they always made sure I felt loved and had both of them in my life. My mom has been seeing a guy named Holt for a while now, and my dad is married to Gigi. When Dad first remarried, I was young, but I did not mind. I even thought it would be nice to have a bigger family. Gigi had a daughter from her previous marriage, Naomi, who was just a little older than me. When we first met, I thought we could be close, maybe even like sisters. That idea faded fast. Naomi had two faces, one she showed my dad, and the other she showed me. When he was around, she was all sweetness and charm. The second he was gone, though, she would pick at me, making fun of my clothes, my hair, anything she could. I was not the type to let someone walk all over me, so I always gave it right back to her. Sometimes, things got heated, like they do between kids, but Naomi always knew how to twist things to her advantage. If we argued, she would start crying just in time for Gigi to come running. Naomi was clever, she would pretend I had hit her, and no matter what I said, Gigi never believed me. She would wait for my dad to come home and tell him a version of the story that made me look like the troublemaker. Dad, to his credit, never took sides. He was just frustrated that we were fighting. Over time, though, it became clear that Gigi and Naomi treated me differently when he was not around. My mom saw it too. She talked to my dad, and after that, he started spending more time with just me. We would go out on weekends, just the two of us. I cherished those moments, finally, time where I did not have to worry about Gigi or Naomi. Of course, Gigi hated this. She wanted Naomi included in everything. Dad, for once, put his foot down and refused. Kyle and I had been together for 6 years before we got married, and he had met my parents plenty of times. During one dinner, out of nowhere, Gigi looked across the table at Kyle and said he was too good-looking for me. The whole room went silent. My mom, furious, demanded to know what she meant by that. Gigi tried to play it off like it was some kind of compliment, but Kyle was not having it. He spoke up for me, making it clear he did not appreciate her words. He told her that he was lucky to have me, not the other way around. That meant everything to me. Still, her words stuck with me. Kyle was tall, fit, and conventionally attractive. I, on the other hand, was shorter and carried a little extra weight. He never made me feel self-conscious about it, never made me feel like I needed to change. But that did not stop me from noticing the way other women looked at him, or from hearing the things Gigi would say when no one else was around. She had a way of making little comments about my clothes, my weight, how I should work out more. They were always disguised as concern, but I knew better. Kyle always shut her down whenever he caught her saying something, but it still chipped away at me over time. Naomi was not much better. She was way too comfortable around Kyle, touching him in ways that made him uncomfortable, ignoring his requests to back off. He told her, more than once, that her behavior made him uneasy, but she never listened. One Thanksgiving, we were playing Truth or Dare. Someone dared Naomi to sit on the lap of the person she liked the most. We all expected her to sit with her mother, but instead, she walked right up to Kyle and pointed at him, making it obvious she wanted to sit on him. Kyle did not even hesitate, he stood up and walked away. The look on Naomi's face was priceless. She was humiliated, and I could not help but laugh. She had spent years trying to get a reaction from him, but all she ever got was rejection. After that, things between Naomi and me were colder than ever, but I did not care. As my wedding day got closer, I had mixed feelings about inviting Gigi and Naomi. My dad insisted, promising me that if they caused trouble, he would personally make them leave. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I should have known better. On the day of the wedding, as I was getting ready, Gigi barged into my dressing room. My mom told her to leave me alone, but Gigi insisted she needed to speak with me. She said it was urgent. I was already on edge, so I told everyone to step out for a moment so I could deal with her quickly. Once we were alone, I told her she had 2 minutes to say whatever she needed to say before I threw her out myself. With this fake, concerned look on her face, she pulled out a stack of photos and laid them out on the table. She told me these pictures would change everything I thought I knew about Kyle. For a second, my stomach dropped. Then I actually looked at the photos. They were of Kyle, sitting at a restaurant, talking to a woman. Gigi told me she had seen Kyle with this woman the week before while she was out to dinner. She said she took these pictures so I would not be blindsided later when I found out he was cheating. She acted like she was doing me a favor, like she was trying to help me avoid making the biggest mistake of my life. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice calm. I told her I would handle it, then I stepped outside and asked my mom to bring Kyle and my dad to my room. Gigi, smug as ever, assumed I was about to confront Kyle in front of everyone. She even patted my shoulder and told me I was making the right choice. Kyle was hesitant to come in, he did not want to see me in my wedding dress before the ceremony, but I told him it did not matter anymore. The second he stepped inside, Gigi grinned like she had already won. I gestured to the photos on the table and asked Kyle if he could explain them. He looked down, confused, then raised an eyebrow at me. The woman in the pictures? His cousin. I had actually met her before. Gigi's confidence started to crack as Kyle calmly pointed out the family resemblance and explained what they had been talking about. My dad, who had been quiet up until now, turned to me and asked if Gigi was the one who had brought me these photos. I nodded and told him everything. He was furious. He looked at Gigi and demanded to know why she would do something like this. She tried to talk her way out of it, but under pressure, she finally snapped. She said I did not deserve Kyle. She said he was too good for me. And then she admitted what I had suspected all along, she had been trying to break us up for years because Naomi had fallen in love with Kyle. Naomi, she said, was prettier than me. Naomi, she said, deserved Kyle more than I did. I just stood there, staring at her, trying to process the level of insanity I was witnessing. My mom had heard enough. She told my dad that Gigi had to leave now. He agreed without hesitation. When Gigi tried to argue, my mother grabbed her by the arm and dragged her out of the room. Not even 5 minutes later, Naomi stormed in, demanding to know what was happening. My dad calmly explained what her mother had done. Naomi turned to me and immediately started screaming. She called me selfish, said I was tearing her family apart, blamed me for ruining everything. She even had the nerve to say Kyle only wanted me for my money, as if that was the only way I could have ended up with someone like him. Kyle had had enough. He told her, flat out, that he had never been interested in her and never would be. Naomi, furious, turned to my dad, expecting him to defend her. Instead, he looked her dead in the eye and told her she needed to leave. And just like that, Gigi and Naomi were gone. Kyle and I got married that day, and it was perfect. Even their ridiculous scheme could not ruin it. If anything, it made us stronger. And honestly, watching their plan fall apart was one of the best wedding gifts I could have asked for. At that moment, we all just stared at her, completely dumbfounded. It was like Gigi had lost all sense of reality. My mother, already furious, turned to my father and made it clear this was beyond unacceptable. My dad, who had been trying to keep his cool through all of this, finally had enough. Without hesitation, he told Gigi she needed to leave immediately. Gigi, of course, tried to protest, but my mother was not about to let her cause any more damage. She grabbed her arm and practically dragged her out of the room. Just when I thought the situation had hit its peak, Naomi came storming in, her face red with anger. She demanded to know what was going on, sensing that something had gone terribly wrong. My dad, his patience wearing thin, laid it all out. He told her exactly what her mother had done. Instead of being embarrassed or apologetic, Naomi turned her rage on me. Without skipping a beat, she started shouting, hurling accusations as if I had done something wrong. She blamed me for tearing her family apart, as if it was somehow my fault that her mother had been caught trying to sabotage my wedding. I kept my composure, trying to explain just how deceitful Gigi had been. But Naomi was not interested in hearing the truth. she was too wrapped up in her own delusion. With a cruel sneer, she spat out that my relationship with Kyle was fake, built on lies, and that her mother was right to try and stop it. She laughed in my face, saying that I was fooling myself if I thought Kyle really loved me. According to her, the only reason he was with me was because I made more money than she did. That was it. Kyle had been silent through most of this, letting me handle it, but at that moment, he had enough. He stepped forward, his voice firm, cutting through Naomi's tirade. He made it crystal clear he had never, and would never, be interested in her. He reminded her that he had already rejected her multiple times, both subtly and outright. Yet here she was, still trying to twist reality to fit her fantasy. Then, he dropped the final blow. He told her that we were getting married, whether she liked it or not. She and Gigi had no right to ruin our day. Naomi, finally realizing she was backed into a corner, hesitated. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt on her face. She had been so sure she could manipulate the situation in her favor, but it was all crumbling around her. My father, who had been watching closely, stepped in again, trying to be the voice of reason. He had always tried to keep things civil, but even he had limits. After watching Naomi dig herself deeper into this mess, he finally put his foot down. He told her she needed to leave, now. For a second, Naomi just stood there, frozen. Then she turned on her heel and stormed out, her pride wounded beyond repair. I let out a deep breath, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. When I turned to Kyle, he was already shaking his head, an amused look in his eyes. He glanced down at the so-called evidence Gigi had brought and laughed. It was so ridiculous that, in that moment, we could not help but find humor in it. Despite everything, they had failed. The wedding went on, completely unaffected by Gigi's last-ditch effort to ruin it. We exchanged our vows, celebrated with our friends and family, and had the wedding we had always dreamed of. Looking around at all the love and happiness that filled the room, I realized something: Gigi's plan had backfired spectacularly. If anything, it had only made my relationship with Kyle stronger. After our wedding, Kyle and I went on a beautiful honeymoon. It was exactly what we needed, time away from all the drama. But once we returned home, it was clear that things had not settled down. My father reached out, and from the sound of his voice, I could tell something was wrong. Apparently, things between him and Gigi were not going well. She was still furious about being kicked out of the wedding and was blaming me for embarrassing her in front of everyone. And, of course, Naomi was not done either. She had been sending me messages, calling me sick for humiliating her mother. She even had the nerve to warn me that I would never be happy with Kyle. At first, I tried to ignore it. But the more I thought about it, the more it started getting to me. Was I wrong for exposing what Gigi had done? Should I have just ignored it? Did I go too far by kicking them out? That is when I turned to others for advice. Update 1. A few days after everything went down, I got an unexpected phone call from my cousin, Fiona. Apparently, during the wedding, she had overheard everything. She had been nearby when Gigi and Naomi were making their little power moves and had caught their conversation. She had not planned on saying anything at first, but after hearing all the details, she could not keep it to herself. Fiona told a few of our family members what she had heard, and, well, the news spread fast. Soon enough, it became a wildfire within the family. The more people found out, the angrier they became. It was not long before just about everyone knew what Gigi and Naomi had tried to pull. The backlash was instant. Family members who had no idea what had happened at the wedding were now furious. There was an overwhelming sense of disgust at what Gigi and Naomi had done, and before long, the two of them were completely shunned by the family. I started getting phone calls and messages from relatives who had just found out. They wanted to check in on me, to let me know that they were on my side. It felt good knowing I was not crazy for how I reacted. Still, one thing weighed on my mind: my father. Since the wedding, I had not seen him much, so I invited him over for dinner. When he arrived, he looked different. He was not his usual self. I could tell the situation was wearing him down. As we sat at the table, he finally opened up. He told me that Gigi and Naomi were making his life hell. But the kicker? They actually thought I owed them an apology. Kyle and I could not believe what we were hearing. They seriously thought I was in the wrong? After everything they had done? It was unbelievable. Dad was just as frustrated as I was. He assured me that I did not owe them anything. If anything, they should be apologizing to me. But as much as I appreciated his support, I could see how much the situation was weighing on him. Then, he told me something else that just blew my mind. Naomi was threatening legal action. She claimed she had suffered emotional distress from the wedding incident. I could not help it, I laughed out loud. The audacity. The pure delusion of it all. But beneath the laughter, I knew this was taking a toll on my dad. He was stuck in the middle of all this, and I hated seeing him like that. I knew then that I had to end this. I decided I was going to confront Naomi and Gigi directly. This needed to be dealt with once and for all. Update 2. I finally decided to face them head-on. Naomi and Gigi had caused enough damage, and it was time to settle things once and for all. I invited them both to meet me at a cafe, not at my home, because I did not want their negativity lingering in my space. Kyle wanted to come with me, but I told him this was something I needed to handle on my own. I did not want them thinking I needed him to fight my battles for me. The moment I sat down across from them, I could feel the tension hanging in the air. Neither of them looked particularly happy to be there, but I did not care. I was not there to make them comfortable, I was there to set things straight. I started by calmly laying out my feelings, making it clear how hurtful their actions had been. I expected at least some acknowledgement of the damage they had caused, but Gigi was quick to defend herself. She crossed her arms and told me, without a shred of remorse, that she stood by everything she had said and done. According to her, she was only acting in Naomi's best interest. That was the last straw for me. I had spent years putting up with her subtle digs and fake concern, and now, after everything, she still had the audacity to justify herself. I made it clear that Kyle was my husband now, and I would not tolerate any more of their disrespect. The very least Gigi could have done was apologize for crashing my wedding with her nonsense. But, of course, that was too much to ask. The conversation quickly spiraled into a full-blown argument. Gigi, stubborn as ever, refused to admit any wrongdoing. She kept doubling down, saying she had done nothing wrong. Then Naomi jumped in, accusing me of being insecure. She smirked and told me that my real issue was jealousy, that I was threatened by her. I actually laughed. I could not help it. Jealous? Of her? The thought was ridiculous. I reminded her exactly who I was, someone who had worked hard for what I had, earned a scholarship, graduated from my dream college, and built a life I was proud of. I did not need to chase after a man who did not want me. Unlike her, I had someone who genuinely loved and respected me. Naomi's face twisted with anger, but she was not finished. She spat out the same old nonsense, claiming I was living in a fantasy, that Kyle was only with me out of pity, that he deserved someone better. Her words were meant to hurt, but I refused to let them. I knew the truth, and I was not about to let her poison my mind with lies. Then, as if on cue, Gigi chimed in. She leaned in, her voice laced with condescension, and questioned whether I could really keep a man like Kyle happy. Honey, I do not know what Kyle sees in you. I mean, come on, a man like him with a woman like you? It is laughable. You might have a good job, but can you really keep a man like him satisfied? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I looked her dead in the eye and told her that her opinion of my marriage did not matter. Kyle and I had something real, something strong, something that went beyond her shallow judgments. And if she could not respect that, then she had no place in my life. Naomi, still fuming, tried to turn things around on me again. She called me selfish, said I had stolen her chance at happiness by marrying Kyle. As if Kyle had ever belonged to her. The argument kept escalating, with Gigi playing the victim, acting as if I was the one who had overreacted. That is when it hit me. There was no reasoning with them. They would never admit fault. They would never change. This relationship was beyond saving. By the time I walked out of that cafe, I knew one thing for sure, I was done. When I got home, the weight of everything crashed down on me. I held myself together through the confrontation, but now, it all hit at once. I broke down, overwhelmed by the sheer emotional toll of it all. It was not just about me, it was about my father too. He was stuck in the middle of all of this, and I could only imagine how much worse things were for him. Later that night, I had a long conversation with my mother. She was furious when she heard how the meeting went. She wanted to confront them herself, but I stopped her. They were not worth our energy. I made a choice that night. I was cutting Gigi and Naomi out of my life for good. Their toxicity had no place in my future. I was choosing my peace, my happiness, and my marriage over their endless negativity. It was not an easy decision. But it was necessary. Update 3. It has been 2 months since my last update, and a lot has changed. First of all, my dad and Gigi? Done. Turns out, I was not the only one who had reached their breaking point. My dad finally had enough of Gigi's manipulation and constant drama. The marriage was falling apart, and he knew it. So, he left. He moved out and is in the process of filing for divorce. Once he cut ties, he went all in, blocked Gigi on everything, refused to engage with her nonsense. Naturally, she did not take it well. With no way to reach my dad, she turned her attention to me. I had already blocked her, so she did the next best thing. She called Kyle. He did not pick up. So she sent him a long message, ranting about how Naomi was heartbroken, how I was to blame for everything, how I had ruined their family. Kyle and I read it together, shaking our heads at how desperate she had become. We did not even bother responding. Kyle blocked her too. Meanwhile, my dad? He looks like a new man. It is like a weight has been lifted off his shoulders. He is smiling more, he seems lighter. It is clear that stepping away from all of that chaos was the best thing he could have done. Kyle and I have been doing our best to support him, encouraging him to focus on himself, to do things that make him happy. And honestly, it is working. A month ago, I decided I needed a break too. So, my mom and I went on a vacation together. She had been worried about me ever since the wedding, and I think she needed this trip just as much as I did. We spent our days walking along the beach, talking about everything and nothing, just soaking in the peace. For the first time in a long time, I felt calm. Being there, away from all the drama, surrounded by my mother's love and support, I felt like I could finally breathe again. Now that I am back home, I find myself reflecting on everything that has happened. Through it all, Kyle has been my rock. His unwavering support, his patience, his love, it has kept me going through the worst of it. I do not know where I would be without him. Looking back, I realize that everything that happened only made us stronger. And now, I am looking forward to the future. A future without Gigi and Naomi. A future filled with peace, happiness, and the love that Kyle and I share. And honestly, I could not ask for anything more.